Hello, everybody. Welcome to WLF Kicks audio podcast. And after we talk to my regular co-host, Tony Adams, you're going to be hearing from the guru of rugby league television broadcasting, Neville Smith. Really interesting chat with him about what the future may hold for rugby league on TV and streaming and all that. And we're going to try to do something, fingers crossed, today, which we've not done before, which is a open line call in from viewers, listeners, readers. Now, my screen keeps going blank, so it may be because Zoom doesn't like us doing that. So I'm not going to guarantee that we're going to have a single caller because it's the first time we've tried to do it. But let's proceed anyway, Tony. And wow, what a elimination final we just saw it from Amy Park. 18-13, Melbourne over the Roosters. The winning try scored inside the final 120 seconds by Will Warbrick. Tony, amazing.
Yeah, it was amazing and a tight, gripping game, but technically not a great game. But both sides, particularly Melbourne, made a lot of errors. And I think Penrith, bottom line, will be watching this game and rubbing their hands because they get to play the Storm next week. And I can't see anything other than a very convincing Penrith win after that. The only good point for the Storm, I guess, is that they get Jerome Hughes back. But they toughed out a win. Some controversial calls from Ashley Klein, which is not unusual with Ashley Klein, and plenty to talk about.
Yeah, now one of them was a knock-on that appeared to happen right in front of him in the first half. It was a Melbourne knock-on, and they went 80 metres and scored a try. Was that, in your view, the most sort of significant call, or were there a couple of others that you didn't like the look of?
Well, the other one, and significantly, the knock-on was by Harry Grant, who then, as you say, went downfield and set up a try. But with about 5 to go, right in front of the Roosters' posts, Harry Grant got whacked right on the chin, stayed down, no bunker, no penalty, no call from Klein. He said, get up and play the ball. It would have almost been a sin bin a couple of months ago, but now it's play on. So it should have been a penalty to the Storm, at which point they were 1 point down. So they should have won the game then and there. So again, it's a real worry, Klein, and monitoring social media, as I tend to do, the fans just do not like him, and they were howling crooked. I think even some Roosters fans were upset.
Now we have our first caller. It's Jeff. Congratulations, you're making history. Did you watch a match? He might just want to tune in and have a listen.
Yeah, and I did just want to tune in and have a listen. I was interested in the discussion. Thank you.
Where are you calling from, Jeff?
I'm in a town called Andover in Hampshire in the UK, so I'm about 10 minutes drive from Stonehenge, if that helps.
I wanted to now. Did you watch the Roosters game and against Melbourne?
Unfortunately not. I was too busy working. I saw a few highlights, but that was it.
Yeah, it was pretty exciting finish. Now,
who's your team, Jeff?
Well, my team is actually in the Northern Hemisphere, so it's the London Broncos, where I catch up with Steve regularly. In terms of the NRL, sadly to say, it's the Warriors.
Sadly, they could be in a grand final qualifier tomorrow.
Yeah, indeed.
This is Jeff, the Rob Halford lookalike. So, a medal god, I think. For our viewers and listeners, big news during the match today, but big news today with London Skolars dropping out of the professional ranks, going back to the Southern Conference League, hadn't won a game all year. So we'll let you go back to listening and watching, Jeff, but before that, we'll get your comment on that because it's a big story in South of England Rugby League.
Yeah, for sure, Steve. I mean, I think it's a terrible shame. It's obviously just the latest installment of where rugby league once again has failed to get a foothold in terms of its development in this country. And I think it's, it's another pointer for me for the governing body of the game in the UK to decide what it wants strategically in terms of, where it sees the game going, and what it wants from the sport, whether it basically wants the sport just to be in its heartlands or elsewhere. But a sad day, I think.
Yeah, it is. But I don't think it was going to go any other way for Skolars, really. Jeff, I'm going to let you go back to lurking. I'll just put you on mute again there, because that's all you wanted to do in the first place. So, Tony, you don't think Melbourne have much chance of progressing any further than next week?
No, I mean, I think Jerome Hughes is a terrific player. I think he's one of the top three halves in the competition. So he was a big loss for the Storm. But having said that, his replacement, the son of one of your favourite players, Tyron Wishart, scored a great solo try. So he didn't hurt him by any means, but they're going to need Hughes back next week, and they're going to need him and Munster to really put on a show to have any chance of beating Penrith. And when the final started, I could see a Panthers-Broncos grand final, and nothing I've seen so far has changed that view.
Now, we won't do a traditional tips run for you, Tony, because there's only one game to tip, but it's a fascinating contest in New Zealand tomorrow, isn't it? And by the way, if you want to support us, patreon.com/Whiteline Fever. And Sean Johnson, is he going to play? They're playing Newcastle in the other elimination final at Mount Smart. It is Mount Smart, isn't it? So is Sean Johnson going to play the whole match?
At this stage, he's going to play. How long he lasts, as you know, with calf injuries, you and I have had plenty. They're Russian roulette. It can feel fine. You see a gap, you accelerate, and boom, you go down like you've been shot. So it's a gamble, but if you're going to take a gamble, a sudden death semi-final's the time to do it. So he ran relatively freely today, but he certainly had that calf well and truly taped up with compression bandages. So they'll be testing him out tomorrow, the Knights, and let's not forget they've won 10 or 11 in a row. I've lost count, so it's shaping up as a fascinating contest, that's for sure.
What's your tip? There's a fantastic cover of the New Zealand Herald of the Barack Obama hope poster with Sean Johnson in it today, and that's in the middle of a Rugby Union World Cup. So it goes to show what a big inroads that the Warriors have made in New Zealand. And I guess for the sake of the game, it will be probably preferable to see them win. I guess for the sake of rugby league. Do you agree? What do you think?
Yeah, for sure. And the game's a sellout. So again, just shows you how popular the code is in Kiwiland. And 10, 20 years ago, no one would have dared suggest that there'd be a full page of, as you say, full front page cover of a rugby league player in the middle of a Rugby Union World Cup. But rugby league fever's well and truly gripped New Zealand, and it's great to see. I'm tipping the Warriors. The Knights have had a great run. 2 months ago, a little over 2 months ago, they were looking around for a coach. Now Adam O'Brien's one of the coaches of the year, and he's earned himself a new 2-year deal. So it's quite amazing, the turnaround. 11 straight wins is something very special. And Kalen Ponga is just an absolutely, he's an excitement machine. If he gets things going, the upset could be on.
Yep. I'm going to tip the Warriors as well. I think the atmosphere is going to be pretty intimidating for the Knights. Now, Tony, there was another thing I wanted to ask you about this week. It was pretty interesting. I think it's kind of people would want to hear journos talk about this, which is the Ben Fordham story about Latrell Mitchell going to a carnival, a rugby league carnival out in Penrith, and a grandparent ringing Ben Fordham and saying that Latrell had told their grandkids to go away when they asked for a photo. And this became a massive story during the week. There's a lot of aspects to it. In one sense, right, there's nothing to it. And I think people just want to say there's nothing to it. But there are some things around it that are of interest. I won't say any more. What did you make of that whole thing?
Yeah, I tend to think if it was anyone else but Latrell, it wouldn't have been a story. And in that sense, I feel for Latrell Mitchell. When you think about it, he lives in a fishbowl. He's asked for photos, for autographs, basically everywhere he goes. He's become a rugby league rock star. He's the fifth Beatle, if you like. And so it's not an easy mantle to carry. And on one occasion when he just does say no, and I guess we have to take the grandparents' words for it, that he was perhaps a bit short, a bit gruff, a bit rude, but he might have been in the middle of something. We don't know the context of it. But bottom line, I think he's just been a little bit hard done by. And it's one of the reasons he's become a bit of an angry, bitter man. I think that he gets picked on at times like this.
Yeah, firstly, we're trusting the word of a 4-year-old to their granddad. I don't know if when I was a kid, I might have exaggerated talking to my grandparents, maybe once or twice. And secondly, we're going on someone who wouldn't put their name behind the allegation. So if you're going to name Latrell Mitchell, I think you've got to name the person who's making the allegation. It's not like sources say it's for bringing down governments and for fighting corruption. It's not for granddad said a footy player told, that is not the place to use, sources. But the other thing only thing on the other side of the argument I would say is Ben Frodin was threatened with legal action. For what? I mean, what? It's not, for what? No one's denying that it happened. So I think Latrell has to just decide if he wants to play rugby league. And in the end, his manager or his club or his family, they're not going to solve these issues. They're not going to solve these issues for him. In the end, unfortunately, he's going to have to decide for himself how to deal with them. And it may be that it cuts his career short, which would be very sad. But in the end, it is his decision. Now, some people watching would say, or listening would say, we shouldn't have even given the allegation any credence or even discussed it. But I do think it's interesting because, as you said, it speaks to what a celebrity Latrell has become and what an issue it is for him to deal with it and what a threat to his career it is. So I think it is worth discussing in that context. Now, the other thing that's really interesting, Tony, is that we've got the internationals coming up. I don't know if you're aware, Nene McDonald was playing at Leeds and he went home for the birth of a child and he hasn't come back. And now he's been named in the Papua New Guinea team to play next week. And I think it's the Prime Minister's 13. When Leeds have a match on next week here to finish the season, they're not going to make the playoffs. And I just wonder, I always say, I don't know about you, clubs shouldn't stop their players representing their country. It's horrible to try and stop them representing their country. But when it's a guy who's gone AWOL, I don't know. Do Leeds have a right to say, hang on, if you'd asked us, we might have released you, but in this case, you don't have a clearance, or if you were Gary Hetherington, what would you do?
Well, I can give you a bit of a scoop here, Steve. I was actually told a couple of weeks ago that when Nanny McDonald came back to the Southern Hemisphere, he was never intending to go back to the Northern Hemisphere. Now, time may prove me wrong, but I think his days at Leeds are basically over. So, he's made the decision for them, and for whatever reason, he's decided his future lies down this part of the world.
Yeah, I guess it's not like he would have had to pay for his own airfare to come back and finish the season for 2 matches. It must be pretty bad situation that he doesn't just want to play out the season and then leave. It's who knows? Who knows? But it's a weird one, because if I was Gary Hetherington, I'd be saying, well, mate, really, you're going to play on the same weekend that you should be playing for us? And if it was Gary Hetherington would have released him anyway, I imagine, with only 1 game left in the season, no finals to play. He would have got released anyway, but it just seems to be rubbing their nose in it, a little bit. Sorry, Tony.
Yeah, I was going to say the Leeds have got a very easy get square, don't they? I think Nene's last cheque will be lost in the mail.
I don't think they use mail for checks anymore, Tony. But anyway, now just very. Here we go. We've got Alex is joining us. So while Alex makes himself comfortable, the other big story is Skolars, and obviously living in London and being around Skolars, I've seen this unfold during the year. They didn't win a match all year. They had an Australian millionaire called Steve Scanlon who was going to take them over, and he subsequently decided he was going to reduce the offer. They said that no, that's not enough, and then they withdrew the offer completely. And now the club has said they're going back to the amateur ranks. Now, that's a second club this year that's pulled out of League One. I don't think League One's got a future, really. I'd like to see the RFL, and the RFL put out a statement that indicated they might already be considering whether League One even is played next year. I'd like to see them ask everyone to apply to be in the championship in the Aussie way, as far as your off-field setup and resources, rather than whatever you do on the field. And if you're good enough, then you can. Jeff is here twice now. Jeff Rowland's on twice. You can join if you, and that way, we don't lose the likes of Cornwall. But I just can't see there being any point in League One being played next year. So that's it for the topical things. And you got any more thoughts about how things go next week? Is it a lay down misere that we get a Penrith Brisbane grand final, Tony? Do you think?
Yeah, I certainly think so. I mean, probably ask me in 24 hours, I'll have a clearer picture after watching the Warriors and the Knights. I mean, if the Knights can get up to 12 wins in a row, all of a sudden they're a real big chance of beating the Broncos. And if the Warriors put on a good showing and get through without any injuries, they could also knock over the Broncos. But at this stage, I think pretty definitely you're looking at a Penrith Brisbane grand final, and it's a ripper because they're the two best teams, the two most entertaining teams. They both got firepower. I don't know who I'll be tipping at this stage, but let's not put the cart before the horse. Let's wait and see what happens tomorrow.
Okay, very quickly, I'll go through. I don't. You probably haven't got them in front of you, Tony. So I'll just quickly go through Super League games this weekend. The Saturday afternoon match pits Hull FC at home to the Giants. I think the Giants away there. Hull FC have put the queue in the rack, I think, for the year. And also tomorrow, Catalans at home to Leeds. It's a game. It's a danger match for Catalans. They haven't really been convincing for me for about a month, but I think they'll just have enough at home there. And a really intriguing game between Hull KR and Salford. Based on last week, I think Hull KR are a better team, so I'm going to tip them to win. That's a 7:30 kickoff local time, and then we're going to hear what games Sky are going to televise in the final round of the regular season. They're all going to be played at the exact same time, and the League Leaders Shield will be kind of like in between three grounds, and the whoever's, I don't know, be in an Uber or something, and then as the scores go, they'll rush to whatever ground it is to present the League Leaders Shield, because three teams are still in the running for that. So that's about it, really, from us. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks to the couple of people who called in. Ben Costello made a cameo. He was at the top of the screen, but then he didn't stick around for very long. But we're going to do. We've got Phil in the room, so we'll let Phil join us, and then after that we'll say goodbye. And we've got John in the room as well. John. So Phil.
They're all coming in.
They are, yeah. 3 people entered the waiting room. So we're going to admit them all. Okay, so first caller, Phil. Phil, thanks for joining us in this historic, I don't think anyone's ever tried to do this before, video open line rugby league show. I think we're turning new turf. Wow, more people calling in now. So we'll start with you, Phil. Did you watch a match this morning? What were your thoughts?
Я матч ебал, пидоры несчастные.
Моя армия черный ворон, снова готовят нам царский трон.
Oh dear. Got some rubbish adverts.
Yeah, it's okay because we're editing this. We're not going out live. So someone whose name is not in English has just tried to call in too. We're not going to let them in. So Phil, what did you think of the match?
It was a fantastic game, wasn't it? Two
Kilometres.
fantastic attacking teams and 2 fantastic defences, seemed to me.
Yeah. Do you think the right team?
Oh, yeah.
So fucking good.
That's awesome. That's the end of our show. That's the end of our show. We'll be back next week. Take care. Okay. Thanks for listening up till now. And as promised, our special interview guest is a fellow who's got a pretty amazing legacy in British rugby league, going back a long way. Probably doesn't want me to say how far back, but it's a long way. And we're at High Wycombe. Maybe Neville Smith, our guest, can explain what we're doing here and describe the surroundings a little bit.
Okay, so we're in the middle of an industrial estate, but which is the production hub for a company called EMG. And my company, In Touch Productions, works in conjunction with EMG to produce live streams for both codes of rugby, using fully remote operation with cameras at the venue and the gallery hub here in High Wycombe.
Now, by the time this interview is posted, I will have written a story about. I've come out here to watch the way they produce a match between Doncaster and Oldham. So I'll put a link to that story in the comments in the description, so you could find that story. But I was trying to. We obviously don't have time to do Neville Smith, This Is Your Life. So I was trying to remember the last time I was here in a conversation we had at lunch to try to pick out the eyes out of that conversation for this. I guess we'll start with how you came. You can hear from Neville's accent. You probably already know that he's Australian. So how did you come to end up here in the UK, and when was that?
It was 1987. I was 25, and I was on my working holiday, which I had been a camera operator at Channel 10, NBN and SBS at the start of the 80s. And I came, as I say, to the UK on a working holiday, managed to get myself into the industry here, again as a camera operator. And it was all around the same time as the birth of satellite television. So with a very long story cut very short, I saw an opportunity. I decided to try and start my own production company at that time and thought, do what you know. So I produced a 1-hour documentary which was based about on the Australian rugby league players who were playing in the UK at the time. Hired a journalist by the name of Dave Hadfield, who came with me for a week, rest his soul. And we interviewed people like Cliff Lyons, who else? Michael O'Connor, Paul Vaughton, Gavin Miller, many others. I shot
Everyone from the Tina Turner commercial.
Pretty much, yeah. From the
Yeah.
I only realised when she died, I didn't know that the first one had been shot in London. And the story about getting Eddie housing. So ET, interviewed him, and went to ground, shot a lot of footage, made a very poor documentary, and tried to sell it to every broadcaster at the time, and no one was interested. But two things happened from that. First of all, a man named David Hill. Sorry about that. That was our talk back from the venue. A man named David Hill, who invented white ball cricket coverage in Australia and went on to become ultimately Fox Sports president in America, and he had gone through Eurosport and then became my boss at Sky Sports. So getting to Sky Sports was, I was in the office of David Oxley, who had seen the documentary, who was the chief executive of the Rugby Football League at the time, and having come from Channel 10, which was where we were doing 10 camera coverage in 1986, to see the BBC's output of the Challenge Cup final with, I think, 4 or 5 cameras, and in my opinion, poorly produced. And I said, the coverage needs to be improved in this country. And David then opened his drawer, literally pulled out a contract and said, we've just signed this deal with a company called British Satellite Broadcasting. Why don't you get in touch with them? So I did. And I wrote to them, sent them the tape, sent a whole production brief and said, you're going to need someone to direct this coverage. Here I am. Astonishingly, they believed me. And for the next 30 years in the company that became Sky Sports, I just sat waiting for someone to tap me on the shoulder and say, come on, you'll be getting away with it.
And during that time, now this is where we could go on forever, but during that time, the grand final is something where, I mean, you're basically the father of the Super League grand final, aren't you? The timing of it. Did you actually push them to have a playoffs and all that sort of stuff? And also your memories of this. I guess I should ask, given I've got a book out about it. You know, your memories of the Super League war and the windfall that came from news. What are your memories around that time?
Oh, it was a revolution. Yeah, we had been broadcasting rugby league for 5 years in the Stones Bitter Championship, and then, with nothing to do with me, of course, suddenly a offer of, I think it was published as £87 million came from the game, from News Corporation, to move the game to the summer to align with the Australian season, and relaunch rugby league. Yeah, summer rugby league had been discussed for a while. Obviously, I was very much in favour of that. I was then saying to my boss, Vic Wakeling, and to the game, this is the time to relaunch the championship. We'd seen Wigan win 6 championships in our time, sometimes 4 or 5 weeks before the end of the season. And I said, I grew up with the grand final. I think the grand final is a great idea. And it wasn't just me. There were many other people in the game who wanted it. I kept saying, we should launch it, because you launch it. Oh no, that's not British sport, we don't do it that way. And then of course 2 years into Super League, it was adopted. The one battle that I did win was, and God rest his soul, Maurice Lindsay, was to play the match on a Saturday evening. Because I said to Maurice, he said, well, 3 o'clock kickoff, 3 o'clock. I said, the problem is that we'll get kicked around the schedules. It'll be like the Challenge Cup final. It'll be, 2 o'clock one year. It'll be 4 o'clock another year. It'll be Sunday. You get moves around. So if we go in at 6 o'clock, 6:30, said, Premier League's done and dusted. We're not going to be competing with that. So Maurice reluctantly went with it and rang me after the first one and said, I won't try and do the Maurice impression that everybody does. He said, mate, you were right. You were right. And it's, and the great thing is, and I do take a bit of pride in that it's never shifted. That slot became very quickly established, and the game could then establish that and dictate the kick-off time.
Yeah, a great partnership for a quarter of a century was yourself and Eddie and Steve-O. How did that relationship begin?
So when I made the documentary that I made in 1988, someone at the Rugby League again tipped me into Eddie to do the voiceover. He tells a story which I think I'll let him reserve for his podcast about how we actually met. But essentially I had borrowed a voiceover booth and a bit of time in Granada Studios, but I'd done it through the back door with a friend, and literally I was sitting on the steps scribbling out scripts. Eddie came and thought that I was some sort of vagrant, having just flown up that morning to do it, and we crept in through the back door and recorded all the voices, which I then took back and edited and put on the program. So that's how we and I got together. And then we turned up at Champion TV, which was the company producing the sports channel, almost unknowingly bumped into each other. And then that was a marriage made in heaven. So Eddie and I were together for all that time. Steve-O had worked with Eddie on the 88 tour, and Steve-O did what Steve-O always does and just turned up at Wembley without a ticket, found his way in, got introduced to me, suddenly turned up at our offices on the Monday. I introduced him to the executive producer, and the next thing we knew, he was back with us from the September for the Kangaroo Tour. He was doing the 1990 Kangaroo Tour as a host, and he fell into the commentary there. And then we brought him back that year, and then the following year, and then it became his life.
It's funny, if I think of the time I was at the Herald or the time I was at the Telegraph, or it's all kind of just a bit of a blur. And I guess some things do stand out if pressed. So if I was going to press you about the moments and the times that kind of stood out, like wide to west, I guess would be one. But what would some of the highlights be?
In terms of Eddie and Steve-O?
Yeah, in terms of your whole time at Sky.
So, the one defining moment, I think, was the video ref. Because when we were launching Super League, I was under a lot of pressure to come up with new ideas. I'd think that people had talked about it. I have a background in refereeing from the age of 12. One of my best friends, who I refereed in juniors with, was Greg McCallum, who was running the referees here at the time. And literally, I went to him. He will say he came to me, but I'll tell you, I went to him with a proposal. We discussed it, discussed the format, how it would work, where the video ref would be, and walked into Morris's office and said, here's the idea. My drive was, at the time, I wanted to put screens into the grounds to advertise Sky Sports Rugby League coverage. And that became a route to do that. And I said to Greg, I've been showing your referees awarding tries that aren't tries and vice versa for 5 years. Why don't we give them the tools to make the right decision? And I say it literally was an hour's conversation with Greg, and then 5 minutes with Morris. Morris loved it. Said, brilliant. Let's do it. And then we went to Paris, having put a lot of thought, a lot of work, and everything into that particular moment when Stuart Cummings went to the very first screen, first decision. Eddie said in commentary, oh, history here now, Stuart Cummings will now look at the screen. I said, Eddie, he's not looking at the screen. The video ref's here in the truck, having talked it all through. But the one good story about that was the one group of people that I forgot to talk about and talk through the process with, it was the replay operators. Because they all looked around and said, what's all this about? And there we were. That's it in a nutshell. So that was a defining moment. With Eddie and Steve-O, I think they were just unique. It was a unique relationship in television production. We're all absolutely best friends, and Eddie and I are still constantly in touch, and Eddie and Steve-O are still constantly in touch, and I touch base with Steve-O every now and then.
So the video referee, it evolved completely separately here to in Australia, or did Australia actually take the lead from you?
We launched it in March 29th, 1996. The video referee didn't make an appearance in Australia until 1997 in Super League. And my understanding was that a very, very well-known and at this moment unnamed radio broadcaster who even went to the lengths of saying, oh, no, that's not live. They take that back and edit it. I was told that by Bill Harrigan when he was refereeing a match over here. So we were not only the first to do it in rugby league, we were the first to do it in world sport, to do a fully comprehensive video technology decision-making process. They picked it up. Rugby Union then picked it up 2 years later. But no, we had a clear 1 to 2 year window where no one else was doing it.
Yeah, that's amazing. So how did it, after all those years at Sky and all those great times, how and why did it come to an end?
Everything has its day. Everything has its day. I had been in the job for just coming up to 30 years. My job had evolved into a management role and moving more away from direct match and production involvement. I was still running the rugby league team. That didn't really suit me. I had always had an ambition to have my own production company from being 18. And I just arrived at a point where the company transformation and an opportunity to leave the company and establish my own operation offered itself. And I discussed it at home, discussed it with the family. I thought, well, I can stay here and just roll down to my pension. I was 57 at the time. Or I thought, I've still got a little bit of petrol left in the tank. I'll get out and go for it. And in reality, my company, In Touch Productions, had been in my heart for 30 years before that. Yeah, and our operation at Sky very much operated like a whole bunch of independent production companies under one roof. It was a wrench. I still have a great passion for Sky, and what they do, and obviously having been involved in it from the very outset, it's very dear to the hearts of everybody who's been through there. But I said at the time it was just a case of it's now or never, and I thought, well, I might as well go now.
So I guess people listening maybe would only have a kind of rough understanding of what your involvement in the sport is now and what you do here on match day. I mean, it's and I guess it's not a simple answer, so it's going to be hard to keep it simple. But basically, what is your involvement in rugby league now? What do you do?
So we as a company are producing in rugby league streamed content, sometimes for the Our League platform, a lot of times for a company called The Sportsman, and we've delivered on behalf of the rugby league a number of match coverage, wheelchair rugby league to BBC Red Button. What my driver is with this is embracing all the new technology. There's two things I want to achieve with the company. One is to deliver the same level of production as you can see, or as close as possible, to a broader audience for governing bodies and for broadcasters, but to make it accessible and financially viable to deliver a multi-camera coverage for a sport which might not get that level of coverage. So within the arrangement with the Sportsman, we've done the Women's Super League, National League One, Challenge Cup matches, and wheelchair rugby league. We also did the PDRL World Cup, did all the coverage for that other than the final last year. It's a different world, and we do it by using what's called bonded cellular technology. So we have essentially cameras at the venue with no truck. Each camera has an individual transmitter, and it's plugged into that. And effectively, it's done over 4G. So we stream full HD signals and audio through the air. Bear in mind, I'm in my 60s, so I don't really understand the technology. I just know what it can do, and I work with people who are a lot smarter than me to make it happen.
Yeah.
And those signals are then delivered to our hub here in High Wycombe and decoded and pushed through a touchscreen operation to create the program. We do the replays here locally. The commentary is on site, but it's embedded in the camera streams. And we add the graphics here as well, and then we deliver a complete signal back to the platform, whichever platform we are delivering to, again, via internet. And then we do also do courtesy recordings, upload for the governing bodies and the clubs. And it's the same model that we do as well for Premiership Rugby Union.
So we've read that the Rugby League commercial are in the final stages of negotiating with Sky. How will that deal impact on your operation? And have you got any thoughts on it? Because obviously there was some golden age there, but with Sky and Rugby League, and now the coverage is, the value of the rights has gone down, and the coverage is also on other channels like Channel 4 and all that sort of stuff. So I guess two questions in one, but how will this new deal impact on you, and what are your sort of general thoughts on the direction of travel?
The one thing I've learnt in 40 years of broadcasting is wait and see what's going to happen. Yeah, and in this moment we're waiting to see what's going to happen. We've certainly done a lot of work with the Rugby League, directly with Rugby League, and obviously with Sky. The deal with Sky is very much the best that was on the table. I know that, I'm convinced of that. And I think it's very good for the game that it's got a continued relationship with Sky. How the other matches are produced, again, is yet to be defined. So we've done plenty for them. I hope that if it goes out to market that we'll get the chance to be involved. Certainly, I say there's still the deep passion for the sport. And I say, for me, it's about embracing the new technology and training younger, new people to come through and deliver a quality product. Yeah.
And finally, just like talking to you about rugby league, it reminds me a little bit about talking to Dave Woods, is that enthusiasm and that love of your own involvement and your own niche and your own contribution. I don't think either of you would ever get completely embittered and walk away from the game because you just have that deep seated sort of love of it and enormous all-consuming enthusiasm for what you do. So what are some of the things over the years that you've learned to accept, the frustrations that you've learned to push past? I mean, philosophically, like I'll help. Like obviously we all get frustrated by, clubs being self-interested. We get frustrated by fans being parochial and, abusing match officials in recent weeks. We get frustrated by the lack of internationals. We wish there were more. Lack of money, I guess, in the game in this part of the world. But as I said, you're definitely a glass half full sort of person. But what have you sort of learned about the sport and the things you can change and the things you can't change in that 30 years? That's going to be my last question, by the way.
It's a good one. I think probably what I've learned is that if you do have an idea which is ultimately going to benefit the sport and you're persistent, then eventually people will listen, or at least give it an opportunity. One thing rugby league is absolutely, is in its DNA is to try new things, to innovate. Now, I know some people think I'm a bit over innovation. I've heard that quote from a leading coach who's a namesake. And I get that, 100% get that. There's certainly no silver bullet. I think the one thing that I will always hang on to is that having survived for, is it now 128 years? I think anyone who's writing rugby league's obituary is very, very much, what's the right word? Naive, yeah. Rugby league will survive. Yeah, it's got a market value, that's been proven in this country and away from Australia. Frustrations, I do get a bit frustrated that I think the NRL could turn its eyes to the northern hemisphere and see that there is a danger that the international game, which I'm a massive fan of, could be confined to the southern hemisphere. It's great to develop the South Seas, and I think that's laudable. But I think that I'll probably get myself into trouble with a few colleagues out there. But as an Australian living here, I can see the navel gazing and the inward looking that comes from there, and the ignoring of the UK market and the European market, where I'm not saying necessarily financial support, but certainly more in the way of visible support, agreeing to tours, agreeing to internationals. Great, we've got a 5-year international program. Terrific. I hope it comes off. Again, over 30 years, I've seen a number of times plans shelved. There's one thing for certain, that the international game has a massive support base here. And I think probably, and Steve, you tell me if I'm wrong here, I think the defining difference between a supporter in the UK and a supporter in Australia is that a supporter in the UK will support a British team, a UK team, ahead of their club, and in Australia, it's the other way around. Too much. So one of the things that really frustrates me is the anomaly around state of origin. And I said it's $1 billion product. Everybody knows that. Obviously, it's key to the finances and the success of Australian rugby league, the NRL. But it is frustrating, or it's an anomaly, that only a third or so of the world's elite players playing in 33 clubs, which is not a big amount, qualify to play in that competition. And obviously we saw the example when there was talk about Sam Burgess becoming an Australian citizen so he could play State of Origin. It should be better, it would be far better if it was Sam Burgess playing for Great Britain, and I would actually prefer Great Britain. I'm very much a traditionalist that way. In a series against Australia. It's been the pinnacle. We experienced that many times, when we had the internationals. We certainly experienced it, but...
And it's the one. It's really the only. We can all have flights of fancy, but the only sort of concrete way to add value to the sport in this country is through Ashes series, isn't it? Really, to cut through. There are other things that might work, or they could work, or they might catch on, but that's a guaranteed way to add value to the product here, isn't it?
100%. There is nothing like Australia playing England or Great Britain in an Ashes series. Especially in cricket, we all love that. We know that. But the old series, I grew up with the Ernie Christensen yearbooks, and I used to play a game every year of Australian team touring Britain, and follow the St Helens and the Wiggins, and it was a card game I had. Maybe you had the same one. It had try, goal, everything else, and I just used to make that up and play it on my own.
I had the AMCO rugby league game, and you had all the teams that played in the AMCO Cup. So there were all these, like Auckland back in the beginning of the 80s, late 70s. Auckland, Newcastle, Illawarra, Monaro. They were all, and you could pick. It was like the modern version of the computer game now, where you can make up teams of anyone you want. You know what I mean? And so I used to love that too. But you're right, and I remember going to the Ashes. In 88 and 90, and then by 92 I was covering it. But now it's a whole generation. It's just forgotten, really, in Australia, and here it's not forgotten, but it's missed.
I think 2003 was the last Ashes series, wasn't it? Then we had the Tri Nations. I was a big fan of the Tri Nations series. I thought that was good. I'm not such a big fan of the Four Nations. But the Tri Nations it's a shame that went away. But the absolute truth is that until, just mind that truck that's just reversing, is that you won't, international success, and the one thing we all want to see as Australians, I certainly do, and I hold my hands up, is to see a British team win a series against Australia, so that I can cheer for Australia again without feeling like I'm cheering for the biggest bully in the playground. That's always
the Lions against the Christians.
And that's the State of Origin story. You might not remember, but I remember nights in the 70s when New South Wales played Queensland on a Tuesday night at Leichhardt Oval.
I remember. Yeah.
Okay, so Origin gave you the chance for cheering for New South Wales, and likewise to cheer for an Australian rugby league team without it being a walkover or anything like that. It needs to have that competition, and that's key. Becomes a pyramid then, and that filters down through the clubs. And
the kitchen's getting busy, so we'll conclude the interview.
Okay.
But thanks very much for your time and for inviting me out here, Neville. And I'm looking forward to seeing everyone in action when the game kicks off.
You'll enjoy it. They're a great bunch, and what we do like to do, and we absolutely have a mantra of, is having fun. So I always want everybody to enjoy their day when they're working with us.
Good on you.